The podcast gods did not want us to record this episode.
Or any of our episodes recently.
We decided, hey, let's get ahead of the game and record a bunch of October shit in September. And then on a beautiful sunny day, the power went out in my whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
The day we scheduled actually an off recording day, you're going to come over in the studio and we're going to do all this stuff. And then couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it.
Well, guess what? I have more news for you.
Okay.
You didn't even know this one. I got a fucking text message right before you came over that the internet's apparently down or could be down. We don't have a guest, so that's not a problem. But if we had a guest booked,
oh God,
it would have been fucking infuriating. And to top it all off, my allergies are acting up randomly, and I don't even get allergies normally.
Right.
So that is wonderful. But we are here recording, and that's something.
That is something. It's a testament to I would say stubbornness more than anything, I guess.
Yeah, stubbornness. Hot. I got hot.
Well, you were in a big ass sweater. So
we will be back in a moment with our review of, actually, as the release of this episode today, Born of Bloodshed by A.D Jones. You are listening to the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me, as always, Spencer, the Newcastleton Knob Nibbler Church. Yeah. I nibble them knobs in Newcastleton, which is a real place.
It is.
It's also the setting of the story that we are covering today.
It is.
In full transparency, we talked about this book for 10 minutes and did the worst job possible, and I deleted it. I just deleted it.
Yeah.
So we're starting over.
We're trying to do better.
No banter. We had none. You like your book? I like the book. We had no structure. It was like, there's a kid. His name's Lachlan. And there's another kid, and I think his name's Billy. And I like the monsters. They bite. So let's not do that again, okay, Spencer? But we are covering Born of Bloodshed.
Yes.
By A.D Jones. A.D Jones was on the podcast episode 166, where we talked about scary stuff. He is a horror writer from the UK, and his first novel, Unbraid, and his last novel, which came out last year, Sacrificial Waters, have some glowing reviews. And the early reviews for this story, mwah. Now, this is a novella, but we decided to cover it for our short story because it's only 80-something pages, I think.
Yeah, it's not that long.
We just did the Kindle version. I didn't want AD to have to send us, out of his own pocket, send us advanced reader copies across the fucking ocean.
Yeah.
And, probably lose it. And I told him we'll buy it when it comes out, which is today, by the way, is the airing of this episode. At least it should be.
Right around there.
Something. So do you know what Born of Bloodshed is about, Spencer?
I do.
Well, I'm going to tell the audience who might not.
That's probably a good idea.
Nothing exciting ever happens in the border towns of Scotland. I think you knew that.
I knew that.
And the village of Newcastleton, with a population in the hundreds, is no exception to the rule. It is not. Like I said before, real place. We'll get to that. That is until kids start going missing and turning up dead and violently mutilated, as they do, in the surrounding forest, always in the forest. A group of teens will be forced to put down their NES controllers, walk away from their VHS collections, and try to figure out what has descended upon their quaint little village. I like that blurb because it gives away the fact that it's like late 80s, early 90s without saying it.
Right.
You get the VHSs and everything. So the story opens up with a prologue, and I don't quite remember if... I know the castle is real, Hermitage Castle. I don't remember if he actually names the castle in the prologue. It's been like a month or so since I read this, I think. But it is a real castle, but the prologue opens with like an archaeological dig where they find tunnels in the wall or something of the castle. And the tunnels... It's like just a bunch of tunnels. They just go every which way, and they find a box as well. But all these things would only fit people that would be child-sized.
Very, very tiny.
Yeah, so that already gives you a little bit of a hint as to what might be happening later on in the story.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing, baby girl, you rock my world, and I want to fart in your mouth.
Ooh.
No, don't do that.
Dude, don't do that. You were doing so good.
Yeah. The actual story after the prologue opens up with a group of friends, Lachlan, Billy, Rory, and Jack. They're playing some TMNT video game from NES. the Nintendo version of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is the just pisses you off. We were at one time stuck paying $60 over US dollars. I guess that'd be the only dollars.
Yeah.
£5, £3. I don't know what the fucking money is over in the UK. I know they say quids and pounds, and I think something's a block of silver you give somebody, maybe like a lead foot or something, like a shoe. You could pay with that. But over here, we just got the American bald eagle dollar thing people use. It's slowly losing value and tanking the world's economy.
Just becoming non-existent.
But anyway, when I was a child growing up, that shitty Nintendo game was like $60, and you'd buy it and you'd play it, and it was awful. But we have this nostalgic memory of it, like, oh, this is such a great game, because that's all we had to play.
Yeah,
it was the one game that our parents could afford to buy us. That's $60, not inflation. That's not $60 now.
Right,
that's $60 fucking 90s. So would it be like $120 now?
And like you said, even though that it sucked, you only had like a couple games, so it's like you still had to play it, even though that you fucking hated it.
But I do have fond memories of getting very furious and slamming controllers with my brother and friends and everything growing up. So good times all around.
It just sucks because like the arcade game was really fun and good.
That was a beat 'em up.
Yeah,
that didn't have that shitty water level that just kills you fucking 100,000 times over and over and over until you just again. Well, it's the thing back then. You couldn't like just punch the TV because they weren't flat screen, easy to break TVs. They were
you shatter your hand.
The TV I had was like a 50s giant box. Like it was furniture.
Yeah,
that had a TV built into it. It was ridiculous. It weighed 900 pounds. I played PS2 games on that thing. Like I had it for a long time because I was a poor.
I think you say was a poor.
Was a poor. Yeah, well, the capitalism, we just stay the poor. And we're writers, so we're never going to break the, unless we sell something to Netflix. And even then, we'll still end up poor after the lawsuits because there's always lawsuits. But this story, just with the opening, and I think there's like D&D's mentioned, and it really gives you a Scottish Stranger Things Celtic feel.
Yeah,
like it's like a Stranger Things meets Celtic lore, which is really fun. I think you described this when you started reading it as like a really good B horror movie.
Yeah,
it's like one of those ones that you just revisit a lot because it's so fun. It's not obviously top tier literature.
Yeah.
This isn't Ulysses or something like that, but just from a fun perspective and good storytelling, good pacing. It is chef's kiss. I really enjoyed this. The early reviews for this are really good so far. As of, I think I'm already mentioned, as of the airing of this, it is out, but we are recording this in the past. September, what's today's date? September 9th, we are recording this. And even though it was in the deleted intro I did, I just want to reiterate that if you did not listen to our episode where we did the Tim Allen Doom sound effects, I highly recommend you go on YouTube and listen to Tim Allen Doom. Just type in Tim Allen Doom, and it's fucking wonderful. I don't even remember what episode that was, and we just aired that last week.
Right.
But it was very, very fun. Actually, that episode, as we're recording, this isn't aired yet. As tomorrow comes out. I'll let you listen to that, though, when we get off here, because you need to hear it.
We're doing all kind of time travel in this episode.
Back and forth. Well, speaking of time traveling, let's go back to the 1990s. That was 1990.
Something like that.
Yeah. You really like the name Lachlan.
I would always have trouble
saying Lachlan or just reading it.
Just in my head, I know that it's supposed to be Lachlan, but anytime I would go to read it, I would always stumble and just you know what I mean. It was just just a me thing. I just couldn't There
was one name that got me in this, and that was his sister. What was her? I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Rain.
Yeah,
but it can also be pronounced Ronnie.
Yeah,
the spelling of this name. Did I say his sister? It's Lachlan's sister, his older sister. Rahne. I'm pretty sure it's Rain, but I think, like I said, I think it can be Ronnie. I'm just going to go with Rain for the sake of this episode.
Right.
I don't know if that's one of them Scottish names or what. We have the opening here where they're in their basement, they're playing the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and this is where Andy does a great job of building the characters and the rapport with each other. So you already get, I believe it's Lachlan and Rory are close friends, and then Jack and Billy.
Yeah.
Rory's the really smart one. You know, the typical character arcs, you get the smart one and the character
It's
tropes.
funny, this just kind of popped in my head with them playing the Ninja Turtle game. It's like they all kind of they all kind of had their own little Ninja Turtles there, like without realizing it.
Yeah, I can see that. So what sets the story off is that their good friend Billy goes missing, and they're waiting at the bus, and they don't think anything of it at the moment. They're waiting. It's not a regular bus, a city bus comes, picks them up, and their neighboring friend Thea comes to visit, and she's a preacher's daughter. She's very important later on in the story, but they're like, hey, where the fuck's Billy? And then there's like a police presence, and they find Billy.
Yeah.
Then what unfolds is a very realistic scene of grief and what would happen if kids, 12, 13-year-olds found out that their best buddy, who they just talked to the night before, he left they're all in the basement, and he left on his own to go home, and they find a very gruesome scene. And then naturally the story unfolds with the kids wanting to get some answers and / vengeance, revenge. They want to know who fucking did it, who killed their friend. And it's hard because I don't want to spoil things too much from here on out. We do get a couple more victims later on. Lots of great gore.
Yes, very that's
not overdone gore, but like gore that's done in the way that's very effective.
Well, that's what kind of like whenever I said earlier about like the B-level horror movie, like that's kind of what like the gore and like that's what kind of made me think of that.
Yeah. Not like a Terrifier where it's just gore for gore's sake, but still, it's fun.
No, but there was sometimes where I was just like, Jesus Christ, like, how are these kids still doing anything?
Exactly. Well, that's another thing, too, is some bad things happen to the kids.
Yeah.
Like, they get fucked up.
Yeah.
So when you're like, there was a couple times where I was reading this and I was like, are any of them gonna fucking live?
Yeah, especially
so there was actually a real suspense. Like normally you read this like, oh, I know this character will live or this, but this is like, I don't know if any of them are gonna fucking live.
Like you're looking on your Kindle and you're like 90% done, and there's still like some stupid back matter on the back. You're like, what's gonna happen?
What's gonna go on here? It's getting a little violent. This had some good jump scares thrown in too, which is hard to do in a actual book, so I appreciate that. The writing was fun and engaging. The pacing I really liked, like it really moves. You don't get while he does have backstory, and like I said, he fleshes out the characters, how they interact with each other and their backstories and everything, but he doesn't do it in a way that bogs the story down.
Right.
Like everything keeps moving forward. I'm going to go ahead and give a spoiler, but I'm not going to spoil the ending. I'm not even going to spoil like the main climax or even what leads up to the climax, but the main spoiler will be the monsters.
Yeah.
So if you don't want if you haven't read it yet, or you don't want, I'll say it's a mild spoiler because he has the picture in the book.
True, like once you start, and that's another thing too. Like if you are worried about being spoiled, even on the little stuff we talked about, like just pause us. It won't take you long to read this thing.
Yeah.
And you come back, finish.
So the monsters, as alluded to in the prologue, have to be small. Turns out redcaps are an actual folklore monster in Scotland. They're like little gnomes.
Yeah.
I didn't read up on the redcaps or the gnomes to know that they're as diabolical as they are in this fucking thing. But in this thing,
they're gnarly.
Their hat isn't like a hat. It's like a fleshy red thing that like soaks up blood or something. Right. It's fucking terrible, and they just rip people apart. Kids rip their arms off and shit. I'm like, Jesus, this is fucking brutal. So kudos,
right?
That's fucking. It's rare that I read something that I go, ooh, that fucking left a mark on me. So if you want a brutal, fun read, this is definitely, like you said, high-end, good B movie.
Yeah.
And the B movie would just be the subject matter.
Yeah.
I started with Stranger Things with a Celtic lore. There were a few things I wouldn't even say I disliked about the book. The only negatives I could really find were probably with the dialogue.
Yeah.
I would say there's three main things, and it's pretty nitpicky. One, I mean, maybe just because I'm American, I don't know. I just felt like it should have been a little more Scottish. Because it's like 1990 Scotland. I feel like they would be, I mean, not the accents. You don't have to do the accents. And he did throw in some fun curses and stuff that I didn't even know what it meant.
Yeah.
Like there were some words in there I didn't know what they meant. But I mean, if I just read this with not knowing where it was based, I would just say random American town.
Yeah, it's some like out in the sticks somewhere.
Yeah, because even the names, I mean, Lachlan and Rain, yeah, but the other names are all pretty normal. I mean, I don't know what a fucking traditional Scottish names of the 80s and 90s. Maybe they were just Rory and Billy and Jack. Two, this was the big one that only threw me off for a couple times. I felt like some modern, and I didn't look up any of these phrases or anything to see if I'm incorrect or not, but I felt like some modern slang or terms might have been thrown in. So, for instance, the one that really sticks out is I think one of the kids say something about, oh, this is nightmare fuel.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that was said in I mean, I'm sure somebody said it, but it wasn't like actual slang that was usually.
It was like a widely known thing.
Yeah, unless it originated there and made it here 20 years later, which I don't think is the case. But I noticed a couple instances where maybe some modern slang was thrown in, and that's one of those things you probably just overlook.
Yeah.
And most people probably didn't even notice because you're just reading, oh, it's a fun story. But that's the same thing I noticed like when I watch Stranger Things every once in a while. Hey, wait a minute. I don't think that's what they would have said back then.
Well, I think that happens. I've heard that's happened a lot with like the music.
Yeah,
that goes on for that because like it was like
maybe the wrong year.
Yeah, it's like they're in the early '80s, but they're playing like late '80s music.
That's one of those things that is especially like I don't know how I don't know how old A.D Jones is, but I think he's probably around our age.
He's seen the.
Well, let's just like play devil's advocate and say he's in his 40s. Even if he was in his 40s, that means he was like a kid in the 80s. So I mean, you're not going to get all the details right.
Yeah.
Now, if you wrote a story set in like I feel like even if we said a story in 2000, we'd probably fuck up the slang.
Oh,
saying bling bling or dumb shit.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, that didn't come up years later. You know, that's one of those again nitpicky. The third thing, which is maybe slightly less nitpicky, is I did feel that the kids spoke and acted slightly older than they're portrayed as, you know, year-wise. So they're 12, 13-year-olds. The older sister, I think, is 16. I felt like the way they spoke to each other at times, not throughout the whole thing, but at times might have been a little more adult. Then again, maybe we're just stupid when we're kids. I don't know. And this also goes into me not knowing how Scottish kids interact. But I felt that there was a few instances where they were, which again, this is another thing I always see in like movies or even again, using Stranger Things as an example again, where I'm just like, that seems a little too adult for these little precocious kids. But
isn't that kind of like I agree with you a little bit, but I had just playing devil advocate, but like isn't that kind of like probably like a trope, kind of like the young badass that are like, you know, the kids that are smarter than the adults.
Yeah, I guess. I just reading it is a little more jarring than it is when you watch it. Jarring's not the right word because it didn't take me out of the story at all.
Yeah,
it's just like if I was reading it and then you told me all the kids were 15 to 17, I'd be like, oh, that makes a little more sense. But I'm also judging by how dumb I was when I was 13.
Yeah,
I don't know. But when I say they acted older, like they go out Stranger Things style, but they want to face down these monsters. Mainly, they're trying to find out what's killing their friends and stuff. And it unfolds in such a way where when they find out, they just go full bore and they're just going to fuck these things up after seeing what they are and how, you know, well, they initially only think there's one of these gnome things. So maybe they think they could beat it up. But at the same time, it's like, this thing's ripping kids apart.
Yeah.
I know me and my buddies, we grew up in a pretty rough area, but we weren't running around beating up monsters.
No.
And we're Americans, so we would have had guns.
That would have been one of those things that's where like the kid that you didn't like, you'd have been like, you go, get him. We'll be right behind you.
But obviously, if you had him act a little more rational.
There's no story.
Yeah, but I think it was Jack who led the story off when they got to the aggressive stuff, was like more gung-ho about it. And A.D actually did a good job of explaining his motivations because like at the beginning, you get Lachlan and Rory's relationship and how they're really close friends. And, they're all friends, but like they're the ones that really click together.
Right.
And then Lachlan has the realization when he's trying to figure out why like fucking Jack is so gung ho on getting this thing, because they even mentioned, like, let's get a cop or something. What the fuck? And Jack or Lachlan finally realizes, like, oh, Billy who got killed was Jack's Rory. Like those two probably clicked and were super close. So you just lost your super best friend, and you're gonna want some fucking vengeance. So they went and they chase monsters and get way in over their head.
Oh yeah,
real bad. Like real bad. Like to the point where are any of them gonna survive? I'll just say this: like there's the scene in the last season of Stranger Things where Max's character gets all her limbs just shattered.
Oh, nice.
It's very brutal. It's very graphic. It's very terrible. It's not that graphic, but there's a scene where one of the characters gets broken and beaten, and like there's a lot of violent imagery.
Oh yeah.
So Spencer, what do you rate this?
I'd do like either probably like a 3.5 or 4, probably
3.5 or 4. I wanted it to be longer.
Yeah, definitely, because I feel like anything else that I would have maybe had to complain about would have been fixed in a longer. Because I feel like again, like with like how you're saying, like how some of the stuff they do is like, well, if he's just trying to do a novella, you kind of have to get it in. You have to get it in there,
I would give it probably a 4.5.
Yeah.
Because one, it was definitely a page turner. Like I read it in one sitting.
Oh
I
yeah.
just kept reading. I couldn't put it down, which is automatically makes it at least a 4 for me if I can't put the fucking thing down. But I just really appreciated the violence and the nonsense, and also I like the Stranger Things kind of vibe. Like I like that stuff. Not too like this wasn't some kind of saccharine sweet nostalgia. This was done in a way where it's like, oh, this is the setting. This isn't the whole fucking story.
Well, also too, and I feel like that there was like one of those things where it's like, hey, we're gonna set it around this time when there's not cell phone and all this technology, to
yeah. Well, what were your negatives for it? Because you said there was a couple.
I mean, like you talked about most of it, and like I was gonna say is just like the compressedness of some of it, like you know what I mean. Like we were saying, like if it was like a little bit longer, I think that would to give it room to breathe, would be a little bit better. And I like the violence, but then like we were saying, like it was at some points it's just like you got to a point of like almost kind of like
cartoonish maybe.
Yeah, like, I was gonna say like anime kind of like just like these like this always like, oh, you think they want new obstacle. And it's just like I liked it because of the way how it was written and paced, but it was like some point there was this like, what, like, how do you get past this, without it being like corny or something like that, you know what I mean? But like I said, he did a good job with it, so I don't know if I would call it a complaint necessarily, but
there were a few times where I just kept thinking while reading it, is like which is why I started to think maybe these kids are actually going to all die, because I was like, they can't walk away from this.
Yeah.
Well, even if they do, would they want to walk away with these fucking injuries? Like, there's a couple characters that were injured so gravely. I'm like, I don't think they're going to want to walk away from this. Like,
or if they could.
Like, what happens to Lachlan?
Yeah.
Like, his face. Like, I'm just like, dude, I wouldn't fuck. Like, you're going to be mangled. You're going to be a mongoloid. Not to give anything away, but yuck.
But again, I think that just like I said, but with the way he did it, I enjoyed it. And again, I think that's what kind of made it that B kind of level. Just like, oh my God, like...
I do get what you saying about the compression issue though, because, well, for one, like with the prologue, that's enough foreshadowing, but gives you just enough information where you're like, okay, I can see where these things probably came from, but it's never actually described or explained, like why these gnomes are here or what their purpose is really. Like there's some information thrown in the story. It's not like you're just like, oh, it just ends, but it would definitely probably made a better novel, I think, like a 200-pager.
Right.
Because you could have had like the whole run up to the big climax. It wouldn't feel as rushed.
Yeah.
Because like I said, the pacing was good, but just because of the fact that it's like 80-something pages, you do get from like point A to Z very quickly.
Because if you had that time, you could have it be like multiple nights. Or
well, that's the
like
thing. If you had the multiple nights, one, you could extend the killing so you don't have a big killing spree. You can have, a little more.
That's where you could put like try to sprinkle in some of the explanations. Like maybe they try to do some research or something.
Well, you could add a sense of foreboding. You can create more atmosphere of fear in the townspeople.
Yeah, especially
because they're not really involved other than like the one cop. Like the
Yeah.
villagers don't really seem to care too. Their kids are still out there running around. There's a village of a couple hundred people. I think the parents would have like, hey, your kid got murdered. You're not going out there.
Well, no, I think though some of the other people kept them inside because remember they do that search and for one of the other kids, and like they're like the group of kids, they're like the only kids out there. Everybody else left their kids. Like
he does explain that, but still, just the fact that they let the kids go with them, like the main core.
Yeah,
I don't know. I just thought that was, again, it was a different time period though.
Yeah, true.
Like, we didn't lock doors and shit in the early 90s, late 80s. So I could see that. It's just, I thought, one of your kids is brutally murdered. Maybe pull it back a little. It's like, hey, you guys probably shouldn't go out. I mean, I know it's mentioned, but it's like, you think the parents would be real strict.
Right.
But then again, that's another trope. The parents,
parents.
Either the kids just, they break out and they go do it anyway, which I think happens here, or the parents are just, lackluster with their parenting skills. Just, go ahead, just come in before dark. We don't want you getting murdered like that Billy boy.
Good old Billy.
Poor Billy. If your name's Billy, you're dying. Billy from Stranger Things died.
Oh, yeah?
Wow. I don't know that's called back or anything. But like I said, still solid. Like, for me, a 4.5.
I liked it. It definitely makes me I want to check out the, what was the Waters one?
Sacrificial Waters.
Yeah.
I believe that's the one when he was on. He said he made it very British.
Okay.
I believe. I could be wrong, but I mean, you might as well just read Umbrate first. That's his first novel.
True.
I definitely enjoyed it. He's a good writer, so that's always a bonus. Like, I told him that I was like, hey, after I read it, I was like, hey, just want you to know, it's fucking well written. Like, it's good. Like, a lot of times people could have a fun story, but they can't write for shit, And then this happened, and then this happened. Like, there's no sense of pacing or rhythm. He's very good at that, so that wasn't a problem. I would have liked to see, as we said earlier, the story expanded upon, some answers maybe, or if he just did a part 2.
Yeah.
Electric Boogaloo.
Or an aftermath, just like, I want to see like what happened to the kids.
Yeah, they're not going to be right. Those kids aren't going to be right. They're not going to go back to just playing turtles, that's for sure.
You right?
So yeah, Born of Bloodshed.
Good
Very
time.
solid novella.
Yes.
It is hard to judge short stories and novellas the same as we rate novels. That's why the star system, or as in our case, the whiskey shots, which we always forget we're supposed to do out of 5 whiskey shots. That's it's difficult with that because there's so many things you lose when you have to keep a certain word count, There are a few short stories we read that excel in that the shortness is actually rather than a hindrance, it helps. You think of some of like Stephen King short stories and whatnot, where it's like, if this was longer, it'd actually be worse.
Yeah.
You're like, it'd be too much. But this is one of those cases where I don't want an ambiguous ending or one that's left off as, I don't know what the fuck's, did the monsters, like, it's like kind of hinted that there's just be more monsters. It's like, those monsters ain't dead. Oh, nuts. Like, what do? We don't know. There's not another one. So write another one. That's what we're getting at.
Yeah.
If you're listening, A.D Jones,
Another one.
Mr. Andy, write another one.
Another one.
We want some more gnomes. You know what? I will give him credit. He made the gnomes fucking scary as shit. Anytime I've ever saw anything about gnomes or trolls, I'm just like, it's fucking goofy.
Yeah.
Leprechaun, Chucky, all that shit I never thought was scary. I thought it was lame. They're small, just fucking boot them.
Yeah.
But these things, like, good God, because like the red cap gnome monster things, they're like kind of like zombies. They're like when somebody dies, and I don't know if it's like they're cursed or whatnot, but it's explained a little bit in the story. They get like recycled into these fucking zombie non-pain feeling gnomes. The only time they felt pain was when the preacher's daughter, Thea, was like preaching at them. Like she was just reading off scripture, or I think she just had it memorized, but like that seemed to affect them. And then I did like he added a cool bit where it's like they don't actually know if it's because the scripture and the word of God actually hurts them, or just because they're from a long dead people, like, medieval time, and they just think it would hurt them. Like some base memory that's in these fucking gnome things from, a very religious society. I would like that expanded on. And the castle stuff, because you don't get back to the castle stuff and the tunnels, and I want that expanded on. I want to know, how they, like, when they got out, or why they were in there. What were they doing in that castle? Is it a gnome castle? I want more information. So that was our poor poorly done review of Born of Bloodshed by A.D Jones, but it was definitely worth the read. As of the publishing of this episode, the book is out, but I don't know how much it cost. He told me $6 on Amazon would most likely be the price, but not being able to go into the future, I'm not quite sure.
You're right.
I'm sure there's a Kindle version that's a bit cheaper.
Yeah.
But it's only like 80-something pages. Buy the fucking thing. I'm going to buy some for the people with the book club. Hopefully they're not dickheads and actually read the thing.
Yeah.
If they don't, I'm not going anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going anymore. I'm not going to that stupid book club no more if they don't read the fucking book. Make them read it.
Make them.
Or I could just wait and do that with one of my books. Hey, read my book, and if you don't, I'm not coming.
I mean, I think that would be a little bit more of a reason to get mad at him, like if it was one of your stuff.
Should I get mad at them not reading or wanting to read somebody they don't know?
Haven't ever
when they've
heard of.
never even read me. They don't read my stuff, even if it's free. They're like, yeah, we'll read it. No, they don't. Anyway, we will check you. What's next week's agenda? Is it the post stuff or basket full of heads? Did we cement that? I know we talked. We had a whole episode about it, and I don't remember.
I think we were gonna try to do Poe first, but I don't think it really matters. I mean,
well,
we have everything read, I think. So
yeah. As of now, next week's episode will be the Poe's poetry. So we'll be covering The Raven and some other Poe poems, and I'm sure that episode will diverge into a lot of nonsense because
it's Poe
and it's poetry.
Yeah.
We're not so good at the poetry stuff. We're also not good at other things like anything.
Yeah.
So there's that. That too. But we are huge in China now. We'll talk about that on the real episode, which will be just aired next week, which is
a month ago.
Doesn't even make sense. What a stupid way to record a podcast.
Hey, Caleb, you wanted to see me?
Ah, Spencer, my good fellow. I've been expecting you.
Yeah, so did you want something or?
Want? Goodness, no. Require.
Require?
Yes. I require your services for the briefest of moments.
Okay.
Surely you can see the predicament I'm in.
Well, actually, no, I can't. I lost my glasses at the pub last night.
A pub, you say? Surely you can't be serious.
As serious as a fought during a recto exam. And stop calling me Shirley.
Rightio. Anyway, if your spectacles were affixed upon your face, you'd see that I, the host of the most prodigious writing and books podcast in the business, has been immobilized by a rather substantial stack of fallen folios.
What?
My to-read pile finally fell on me while I was taking a nap.
But you're on a podcast table.
I hardly see how that matters.
And you're naked.
I hardly see how that matters.
Dude, your hairy ass is touching my drink coaster.
I hardly see how that matters.
It matters to me.
Can you just unbury me?
No way. Your reckless reading got you into this mess.
Blockhead! Wait! Don't go! There's a copy of War and Peace wedged in my taint. Spencer! Can you at least leave me a bottle of whiskey? Hello? Can't get enough drunken nonsense? Listen to new episodes of the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast every Tuesday wherever you get your pods.